Martha Jensen stood frozen in the doorway of their bedroom, her husband Harold's phone clutched in her trembling hand. The message that had just pinged through was unmistakable. Can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Last night was amazing. Love you. 70 years of life experience hadn't prepared Martha for this moment. 30 years of marriage, 3 decades of compromise, of putting off dreams of building a life together in their modest suburban home outside of Cincinnati, and this was how it ended. With a text message from someone named Kimberly at 11:42 on a Tuesday morning. Martha? What are you doing with my phone? Harold stood in the hallway behind her, his once familiar face suddenly that of a stranger. At 72, he still maintained the confident posture she'd fallen for all those years ago, though his hair had thinned and his middle had softened considerably. But his eyes, those eyes that had once looked at her with such tenderness, now held something else entirely. Panic. Who's Kimberly? Martha asked, her voice steadier than she'd expected. Harold's expression cycled rapidly through surprise, denial, and finally resignation. He slumped against the wall. You weren't supposed to find out like this. How exactly was I supposed to find out, Harold? After 30 years? Was there a preferred method? Harold said nothing, just stared at the worn carpet they'd promised to replace for the last 5 years. How long? Martha demanded. 6 months, he mumbled, then corrected himself. Almost 7. Martha felt something crack inside her, but it wasn't her heart, not exactly. It felt more like a dam breaking, releasing something powerful and unexpected. She's 53, Harold continued, as if this somehow made it better. She works at the bank. It just happened. Martha laughed, a sharp sound that seemed to startle them both. Things don't just happen, Harold. You made choices. Every single day for 7 months you made a choice. She handed him back his phone, careful not to let their fingers touch. I want you to pack a bag and leave. Now. Harold looked up, genuine surprise crossing his features. In 30 years of marriage, Martha had never spoken to him with such authority. Martha, be reasonable. We should talk about this. We can work through. I said leave. Where am I supposed to go? Martha smiled thinly. I believe Kimberly has a lovely place over on Willow Street. The loan officer from the bank, right? The one who helped us refinance last year? I'm sure she'd be delighted to have you. Harold's face flushed. I'll go to Dave's, he said, referring to his brother who lived across town. Fine. Just be gone when I get back. Martha grabbed her purse and car keys from the dresser. Where are you going? Harold asked, his voice smaller now. Martha paused at the door. For the first time in 30 years, Harold, I don't owe you an explanation. As she backed her aging Volvo out of the driveway, the practical car they'd chosen together because Harold thought foreign sports cars were ridiculous at our age, Martha felt something strange bubbling up inside her. Not just anger or heartbreak, but something that felt dangerously close to freedom. She drove aimlessly for an hour, finally parking at Eden Park, where they'd had their first date, overlooking the Ohio River. Her phone rang 3 times, Harold, each time before she turned it off completely. It was there, watching the sunset paint the water copper and gold, that Martha Jensen made a decision. Harold had taken 30 years of her life. He would not take 1 day more. 2 weeks later, they sat across from each other in their attorney's office. Harold looked tired, the confident posture now completely deflated. Martha, on the other hand, sat straight-backed in a new blue dress she'd bought specifically for this meeting. Martha, please, Harold said while they waited for the lawyer to return with the final paperwork. This is happening too fast. We should try counseling. 30 years has to count for something. Martha looked at him steadily. It counted for something to me, Harold. That's the difference. I made a mistake. People make mistakes. No, Martha said calmly. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner. What you did was a choice. A series of choices, actually. Harold's eyes narrowed slightly. You weren't exactly perfect yourself, you know. Always nagging about money, never wanting to take risks or have any fun. Martha felt that strange bubble of freedom rising again. You're right, Harold. I was cautious with money because someone had to be. Because every time I wanted to travel or try something new, you said we couldn't afford it. We need to be practical, Martha. We need to save for retirement, Martha. She mimicked his voice with surprising accuracy. And now I find out you've been taking your girlfriend to that French restaurant downtown that was too expensive for our anniversary. The lawyer returned before Harold could respond, carrying their dissolution agreement. As they went through the final details, Martha remained composed and focused. They'd already agreed to sell the house and split the proceeds. Martha would get Harold's half of their retirement accounts in exchange for him keeping his pension intact. It was a clean break, cleaner than Martha had expected Harold would agree to, but guilt was a powerful motivator. "Just one more thing," Martha said as they finished signing the papers. "I'd like it noted that I'll be taking the full cash value of my portion immediately rather than waiting for the house to sell." The lawyer blinked in surprise. "That's unusual, Mrs. Jensen. It would mean taking a slight loss." "I understand," Martha said. "I have plans that won't wait." Later, as they stood in the parking lot, the last time they would see each other until the house closing, Harold finally asked the question. "What plans, Martha? What are you going to do?" Martha smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes for the first time in weeks. "Everything you said we couldn't afford." The for sale sign had been in the front yard for exactly 6 days when Martha received the call from their realtor about an all-cash offer, $15,000 above asking price. The Cincinnati housing market was experiencing an unexpected boom, and their modest 3-bedroom ranch-style home, with its recently updated kitchen, a compromise instead of the European vacation for their 25th anniversary, had attracted multiple bidders. Martha hung up the phone and surveyed the living room. 30 years of life together, now reduced to labeled boxes and color-coded Post-it notes. Yellow for Martha, blue for Harold, green for donation, red for trash. The methodical organization had kept her sane these past weeks, giving her something to focus on besides the hollow feeling that occasionally threatened to swallow her whole. "He cheated on you," she reminded herself aloud in the empty house. "He lied for months. He doesn't deserve your tears." Still, dismantling 3 decades of shared life wasn't easy. Each object held memories: the crystal vase from their honeymoon in Niagara Falls, the mismatched china they'd collected piece by piece during weekend antiquing trips, the collection of refrigerator magnets from places they'd actually managed to visit. Mostly national parks in nearby cities, never the international destinations that had filled Martha's dreams since childhood. Martha picked up a small wooden box from the bookshelf, one without a Post-it note yet. Inside were dozens of travel brochures and magazine clippings she collected over the years. Paris cafes, Greek islands, African safaris, Japanese cherry blossoms. Martha had kept them all, even as each suggestion was met with Harold's practical objections. "Too expensive. Too far. Too dangerous at our age. Maybe next year when the timing's better." Next year had never come. There had always been something more practical to spend money on, some reason to delay. The kitchen renovation, Harold's golf club membership, the new water heater, a more reliable car. Martha had been leafing through these brochures less than an hour before discovering Harold's affair. She'd been planning to make one more pitch for a trip to celebrate their upcoming anniversary. One more attempt to see something of the world before they were too old to enjoy it. Kimberly had inadvertently saved her from another rejection. Martha closed the box and placed the yellow Post-it note on top. Then she reached for her laptop, a recent purchase she'd had to teach herself to use after years of letting Harold handle anything technical. She opened the confirmation email she'd received that morning and read it again, her heart racing with equal parts terror and excitement. "Congratulations, Martha. Your World Discovery Pass has been approved. This unlimited 12-month global travel package includes accommodations, transportation, and guided experiences across all 6 continents. Our concierge will contact you within 24 hours to begin planning your journey." The package had cost nearly her entire liquid savings, money that Harold didn't even know she had. Small amounts squirreled away from her part-time bookkeeping job at the library, birthday checks from her sister, the inheritance from her mother 5 years ago that she'd kept in a separate account, just in case. For 30 years, Martha had been the practical one, the careful one, the one who made sure the bills were paid and the future was secure. Now at 70, she was about to become something else entirely. Her phone rang, the concierge, right on schedule. "Mrs. Jensen? This is Claire from World Discovery. I'll be your personal travel coordinator for the next year. Are you ready to start planning your adventure?" Martha took a deep breath. "More than ready. But please call me Martha." "Wonderful, Martha. Do you have any destinations in mind to start with?" Martha opened the wooden box again and pulled out the most worn brochure, its corners soft from years of handling, its colors slightly faded. The Eiffel Tower gleamed on its cover above elegant script. "Paris, the city of light." "I'd like to begin in Paris," Martha said firmly. "As soon as possible." "Paris is beautiful this time of year," Claire replied enthusiastically. We could have you there by next week if you're able to move quickly. Next week. Not next year. Not someday. Next week. That would be perfect, Martha said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. After finalizing the initial details, Martha ended the call and walked to the bedroom, the room she'd slept in alone for the past month. From her closet, she pulled out a small fireproof lockbox and opened it with the key she kept on her keychain. Inside was her passport, unused except for a brief trip to Canada years ago. The photo showed a younger Martha, her hair still more brown than gray, her smile tentative as if she wasn't quite sure she deserved to have this document of possibility. Next to the passport was an elegant leather-bound journal, a gift from her sister on her 65th birthday. The inscription read, "It's never too late to write a new story." The pages remained blank. Martha had been saving it for something special. The perfect use for it suddenly became clear. She would document her journey, not just with photographs or social media posts like younger travelers, but with real handwritten reflections. And she would share those reflections in the most pointed way possible. Martha reached for her phone again and opened her contacts. She scrolled to Patricia Knowles, her friend who worked at the local printing shop. "Patty? It's Martha. I need a favor. How quickly can you print custom postcards?" The taxi pulled away from Charles de Gaulle Airport, carrying Martha through the early morning Parisian traffic. Sleep-deprived and disoriented after her first transatlantic flight, she nonetheless pressed her face against the window like an eager child, unwilling to miss a single moment of her arrival in the city she dreamed about for decades. Spring had fully embraced Paris. Trees along the boulevards shimmered with fresh green leaves, and bursts of flowers brightened every park and median. Even through her exhaustion, Martha felt a surge of something she hadn't experienced in years, pure, unadulterated wonder. "First time in Paris, madam?" the driver asked in accented English, catching her wide-eyed expression in the rearview mirror. "First time anywhere," Martha replied honestly. "I'm 70 years old and this is my first time in Europe." The driver smiled broadly. "Then you have chosen the perfect place to begin. Paris is for all ages, the young, the old, everyone finds their own Paris." As they turned onto a wide boulevard, the Eiffel Tower appeared suddenly between buildings, its iconic silhouette more impressive in person than in all the pictures Martha had collected over the years. Her breath caught. "There she is," the driver said proudly. "La Dame de Fer, the Iron Lady." Martha felt tears prick her eyes. "She's beautiful. Wee and strong. Did you know, madam? They built her to be temporary, for an exhibition. They planned to tear her down after 20 years. But she refused to go. She made herself essential." He chuckled. "Like many good women, non?" Martha smiled at the unexpected wisdom. "Like many good women, yes." The taxi eventually turned into a narrow street in the Saint-Germain-des-Prés neighborhood and stopped before a discreet entrance with a small brass plaque, Hôtel des Artistes. Claire from World Discovery had arranged accommodations in this boutique hotel, housed in a former 19th century artist's residence. "Madame Jensen." The concierge greeted her warmly as Martha entered the elegant lobby. "Welcome to Paris. Your room is ready. We prepared it early when we heard you were arriving this morning." "Thank you," Martha said, still feeling slightly dazed by the reality that she was actually here, standing on Parisian marble, breathing Parisian air. "Your package from World Discovery arrived yesterday," the concierge continued, handing her an envelope. "And there's one more thing." He reached under the counter and produced a small gift-wrapped box. "This was delivered for you last evening." Puzzled, Martha accepted the unexpected package. The card attached simply read, "For the beginning of your adventure, Claire." In her room, a charming space with a small wrought iron balcony overlooking a picturesque courtyard, Martha unwrapped Claire's gift. Inside was an elegant smartphone with a note explaining it had international service already activated and was preloaded with travel apps, maps, translation software, and a direct line to Claire herself. A modern survival tool for a woman who had barely mastered texting. After a brief nap to combat the worst of her jet lag, Martha ventured out for her first Parisian experience. She found a small cafe just around the corner from her hotel and settled at an outdoor table, ordering in her careful, textbook French, un café crème, s'il vous plaît. The waiter responded with a rapid stream of French that left her bewildered. "Je suis désolée," Martha apologized. "Mon français est très limité." "I asked if you would like something sweet with your coffee," he replied in perfect English, his eyes twinkling kindly. "First day in Paris? Is it that obvious?" Martha laughed. Only in the best way. You have the eyes of someone truly seeing Paris, not just checking monuments off a list. He gestured to the small leather-bound journal she'd placed on the table. You are a writer? No, Martha said, running her fingers over the still pristine cover. Just a traveler keeping track of her journey. The best kind of writing, he approved, before heading inside to fetch her order. When her coffee arrived, accompanied by a small chocolate macaron on the house for your first day in Paris, Martha finally opened the journal. The blank first page had intimidated her for years, but now the words came easily. Paris, Day 1. I am sitting at a café in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, drinking proper French coffee and watching Parisians hurry past. My husband of 30 years is currently living in his girlfriend's condominium in Cincinnati, while I am here in Paris, using the money we couldn't afford to spend on the trip of a lifetime. The waiter just gave me a chocolate macaron because it's my first day in the city. Harold hates macarons, says they're overpriced sugar. It's delicious and I'm having another. Later that afternoon, after exploring the neighborhood and discovering a small bookshop where the owner helped her select a French novel, simple enough for beginners, Martha returned to her hotel. She retrieved a small stack of blank postcards from her suitcase, custom-made by her friend Patty back in Cincinnati. The cards featured a design of Martha's creation, a simple, elegant border surrounding the words "Places we could have gone together" in graceful script. The reverse side had been left blank for her to affix actual photos from her travels and write her messages. Martha selected one and carefully attached a photograph she'd taken that morning of her café table, complete with coffee cup, macaron, and the blurred outline of the Eiffel Tower visible between buildings in the distance. Then she began to write. Harold. Today I had coffee and macarons at a café in Paris. The total cost was €9, roughly $10. We could have afforded this 6,000 times over with just what was in our joint savings account. The hotel where I'm staying costs less per night than your monthly golf membership. The sun is shining. The people are lovely. The coffee is better than anything we ever had at home. Thinking of you, Martha. She addressed it to Harold at his girlfriend Kimberly's address and placed it in the hotel's outgoing mail basket. As she watched it disappear in the concierge's hands, Martha felt a weight lift from her shoulders, the first of many truths she planned to mail across the ocean over the coming year. That evening, Martha did something she'd never have done with Harold. She took a sunset boat cruise on the Seine. As the vessel glided beneath historic bridges and past illuminated monuments, a young French couple sharing her table offered to take her photo. In the picture, which they insisted on taking several times to get just right, Martha stood with the glittering Eiffel Tower behind her, her silver hair catching the golden hour light, her smile wider and more genuine than it had been in photographs for years. You are beautiful, madam, the young woman said sincerely as she returned Martha's phone. So full of joy. Martha thanked her, feeling tears threaten again. The young woman was right, there was joy radiating from within her. The kind of joy that comes not just from seeing beautiful places but from reclaiming one's life. As darkness fell completely and the boat returned to its dock, Martha made a decision. She would not waste a single moment of this year on regret or resentment. She would use every day to discover not just the world, but the Martha Jensen who had been waiting patiently for 70 years to emerge. Paris was just the beginning. The Greek island of Santorini stretched before Martha like a living postcard, whitewashed buildings cascading down volcanic cliffs, their blue domes mirroring the perfect azure of the Aegean Sea below. She stood on the private terrace of her villa in Oa, the island's most picturesque village, breathing in the scent of salt air mingled with bougainvillea blossoms. 3 weeks had passed since her arrival in Paris. 3 weeks of museums and gardens, of sidewalk cafes and evening strolls along the Seine. 3 weeks of discovering that her high school French was better than she thought, of making casual friends with shopkeepers and fellow travelers, of learning to navigate foreign metro systems and read unfamiliar menus. 3 weeks of remembering who Martha Jensen had been before she became simply Harold's wife. Now she was ready for her second destination, chosen specifically because Harold had vetoed it most vehemently when she'd suggested it for their 25th anniversary. Greece? In our 60s? Martha, be practical. It's all steep hills and ancient ruins. We'd throw our backs out the first day. Besides, do you know how much those island hotels cost? The memory of his dismissal made the view before her even sweeter. Yes, her villa was expensive, though nowhere near as costly as Harold had claimed when shooting down her dreams. And yes, Santorini had hills and stairs that challenged her 70-year-old knees. But the beauty surrounding her was worth every euro and every twinge. Martha had arrived the previous evening, too exhausted from travel to do more than collapse into bed after a light dinner. But this morning, this glorious morning, she had awakened to a knock at her door and the delivery of breakfast on her terrace. Fresh yogurt with honey and walnuts, warm bread, local cheese, and the most perfectly ripe peach she'd ever tasted. Now fortified and caffeinated, Martha prepared for her first full day on the island. She'd arranged for a private guide, partly because she worried about navigating the steep pathways alone, and partly because, after decades of Harold dictating their rare vacation itineraries, she wanted someone knowledgeable who would actually listen to her interests. "Mrs. Jensen? I am Eleni, your guide for today." Martha turned to find a woman perhaps in her 50s, with sun-weathered skin, intelligent eyes, and a warm smile standing at the entrance to her terrace. "Please call me Martha." "Martha, then. Welcome to Santorini. Are you ready to discover our island?" Over the next several hours, Martha and Eleni explored OIA's winding pathways, stopping frequently for Martha to catch her breath or to admire particularly stunning vistas. Unlike the rushed, checkbox tourism Harold had preferred, "We saw it. Now let's move on," Eleni encouraged Martha to linger, to absorb, to truly see the places they visited. "This is your journey," Eleni said when Martha apologized for pausing so often. "There is no correct speed for discovery." They visited a small, family-owned winery nestled on the volcanic slopes, where Martha sampled crisp white Assyrtiko wines made from grapes grown in the island's unique soil. They explored tiny shops tucked away in side alleys where local artisans created jewelry inspired by ancient Greek designs. They stopped for lunch at a taverna where the owner, upon learning it was Martha's first visit to Greece, insisted on bringing her small tastes of traditional dishes beyond what she'd ordered. Throughout the day, Martha took dozens of photographs, not just of the spectacular scenery, but of small details. An elderly local woman stringing jasmine flowers outside her door, a cat napping in a splash of sunshine on whitewashed steps, a fisherman mending nets in the small harbor below the village. "You have a good eye," Eleni remarked, watching Martha photograph a doorway framed by cascading pink bougainvillea. "You see what many tourists miss." "I've been looking at the world through other people's eyes for too long," Martha replied. "I'm learning to trust my own vision." That evening, as golden hour transformed the white buildings to amber and rose, Martha sat at a cliffside restaurant Eleni had recommended, dining on grilled fish caught that morning and vegetables grown in the island's volcanic soil. At a nearby table, a couple approximately her age was engaged in what appeared to be a tense discussion, the man checking his watch repeatedly while the woman gazed longingly at the sunset. "We should head back," Martha overheard him say in an American accent. "The bus schedule said the last one returns at 8, and I don't want to get stuck paying for a taxi." "But we've rushed through everything today," the woman protested quietly. "Couldn't we just once enjoy a moment without worrying about the schedule or the budget? Be practical, Judith. We have 3 more islands to see in the next week." The exchange was so familiar that Martha had to turn away to hide her reaction. How many similar conversations had she and Harold had over the years? How many sunsets had she missed because of practicality? When the waiter came to clear her plate, Martha made an impulsive decision. "Could you please bring me your best dessert?" she requested, "and a glass of that sweet Vinsanto wine I've heard about?" Later, as stars began to appear above the darkening sea and the lights of the village created a magical glow, Martha savored the rich combination of walnut cake, local honey, and sweet-aged wine. The couple had departed, hurrying to catch their bus, the woman casting one last wistful glance at the magnificent twilight sky. Back in her villa, Martha selected another of her custom postcards. This one she adorned with a photo of her dessert, the nighttime caldera view visible through the restaurant window behind it. Her message was brief. "Harold, tonight I watched the sunset from a cliffside restaurant in Santorini while enjoying walnut cake and 20-year-old Vinsanto wine. The wine cost €15 a glass. The view was priceless. I thought about all the sunsets we missed because we needed to get back to the hotel, or had to get an early start tomorrow. The only time that matters is now." "Martha." She stared at the card for a long moment before adding a postscript. "Yes, I climbed 127 stairs today and my back feels fine." As she prepared for bed, Martha's phone chimed with a text message. It was from Claire at World Discovery. "How is Santorini treating you? Ready to discuss your next destination?" Martha smiled as she typed her response. "It's even more beautiful than I imagined. And yes, I've been thinking about where to go next. How difficult would it be to arrange a safari in Kenya?" Harold had dismissed that dream most emphatically of all. Africa? At our age? Out of the question. Too dangerous, too remote, too expensive. Martha fell asleep that night with visions of savannas and wild animals dancing in her head, the gentle Aegean breeze carrying the scent of jasmine through her open window, and not a single thought of practicality to disturb her rest. Dawn broke over the Masai Mara with a silent majesty that took Martha's breath away. From the private veranda of her luxury tent at the Eco Lodge, she watched as the vast savanna gradually revealed itself in the growing light, first as shadowy shapes, then as a tapestry of golden grasses stretching toward distant purple mountains. A family of elephants moved unhurriedly across the landscape, their great forms silhouetted against the rising sun. In the middle of the herd, a baby elephant trotted to keep pace, its trunk occasionally reaching up to touch an adult for reassurance. Martha lifted her new camera, a professional-grade model she'd purchased in Athens before flying to Nairobi, and captured the scene. After just 2 months of travel, she'd discovered a passion for photography that she'd never known existed. Her tentative early snapshots had evolved into thoughtfully composed images that, according to Jabari, her Kenyan guide, revealed an eye that truly sees. "Good morning, Mrs. Martha," a soft voice called from behind her. It was Nala, one of the staff members who had taken a special liking to the American grandmother traveling alone. "Your coffee is ready, and Jabari asked me to tell you that whenever you finish breakfast, he is prepared for today's drive." "Thank you, Nala. I'll be ready in 30 minutes. After enjoying her coffee and a breakfast of fresh fruit and pastries, Martha changed into the practical safari attire she'd purchased in Nairobi: lightweight pants, a long-sleeved shirt to protect from the sun, and a wide-brimmed hat. A far cry from the sensible polyester slacks and floral blouses that had constituted her wardrobe back in Cincinnati. Jabari waited beside the open-air Land Rover that had become Martha's gateway to wilderness wonders over the past week. At perhaps 40, he possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of Kenya's wildlife, landscapes, and cultures, combined with the patience of a born teacher. "Ready for your last day in Masai Mara?" he asked with a wide smile. "I have saved something special." As they drove across the savannah, Martha reflected on the 3 weeks she'd spent in Kenya. After 2 days exploring Nairobi, where she'd visited the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust and bottle-fed an orphan baby elephant, an experience that had brought her to tears, she'd flown in a small plane to this remote camp in the Masai Mara National Reserve. Her days had fallen into a pleasant rhythm: early morning game drives when the animals were most active, leisurely lunches back at camp while the midday heat discouraged exploration, evening drives to witness spectacular sunsets and glimpse nocturnal creatures beginning their nightly routines. She'd seen lions lounging in the shade of acacia trees, cheetahs teaching cubs to hunt, hippos submerged in muddy rivers with only their eyes and ears visible, and more species of birds than she could count. Each sighting filled her with a childlike wonder that made her 70 years feel insignificant. Yesterday, she'd even visited a Maasai village where the women had taught her traditional beadwork techniques and dressed her in brilliantly colored fabrics for a photograph that now ranked among her favorites. "Look there," Jabari said quietly, interrupting her reflections. He pointed toward a solitary acacia tree perhaps 100 yards away. "Do you see?" Martha raised her binoculars. At first, she saw nothing unusual, but then a slight movement caught her eye. Draped along a substantial branch was the long, powerful form of a leopard, the one major predator that had eluded her until now. "Oh my," she breathed as Jabari carefully maneuvered the vehicle closer. "She's beautiful." "It is a male," Jabari corrected gently. "And he has something in the tree with him." As they drew nearer, Martha could see the leopard was guarding a kill, an antelope of some kind, that he had somehow hoisted into the tree to protect it from scavengers. "Incredible strength," Jabari explained. "Leopards can carry prey heavier than themselves up into trees." They remained watching the magnificent creature for nearly an hour as it dozed in the growing heat, occasionally opening golden eyes to survey its domain. Martha took dozens of photographs, but also spent long minutes simply observing, committing to memory the pattern of spots on the cat's coat, the casual power in its relaxed limbs, the utter belonging it displayed in its environment. "This is the Africa most people never see," Jabari said softly. "Not the Africa of problems that makes the news, but the Africa of wonders that has existed for millennia." "I almost didn't see it either," Martha replied. "My husband always said Africa was too dangerous, too difficult." Jabari smiled. "And yet here you are, Mrs. Martha, stronger than you knew." Later, as the sun began its descent, Jabari drove to a special spot he had promised would provide the perfect conclusion to Martha's Kenyan adventure. They crested a gentle hill and Martha gasped at what awaited them. A small table had been set up, complete with white tablecloth, proper china, and champagne cooling in a bucket. Behind it, the savannah stretched endlessly, painted in the gold and amber hues of approaching sunset. The staff wanted to give you a proper send-off, Jabari explained, helping her from the vehicle. A sundowner to remember. A young man Martha recognized from the camp appeared from behind a nearby acacia tree, dressed in formal attire rather than his usual work clothes. He bowed slightly before pouring champagne into 2 flutes. Asante Sana, thank you very much for visiting our country, he said with dignified formality. It has been an honor to serve you. Touched beyond words, Martha raised her glass in toast. The honor has been entirely mine. As Jabari and Martha sipped champagne and watched the spectacular sunset unfold before them, a parade of wildlife passed in the distance, a herd of zebras, several giraffes browsing the tallest trees. A solitary rhinoceros moving with surprising grace for its bulk. You know, Martha said reflectively, my husband always insisted we needed fancy hotels with all the amenities. He would never have considered staying in a tent, no matter how luxurious. He would have missed all of this. Some people confuse comfort with luxury, Jabari replied. True luxury is experience. That night, after packing for her departure the following morning, Martha sat at the small desk in her tent and selected her next postcard. She attached a photograph of herself with the Maasai women, their vibrant traditional garments a riot of color against the landscape, their faces and hers alight with shared joy. Harold. Today I watched a leopard guard its prey in an acacia tree, then drank champagne as the sun set over the Masai Mara. Yesterday these wonderful women taught me their beadwork techniques and dressed me in their traditional clothing. You said Africa was too dangerous and too primitive for people our age. The only danger was almost missing this experience. My tent has hot running water, electricity, and better coffee than we ever had at home. It costs less per night than the riding mower you insisted on buying for our quarter-acre lawn. Africa isn't waiting for modern conveniences. It already has everything it needs. As do I, Martha. Before sleeping, Martha reviewed her itinerary for the coming months. From Kenya, she would fly to Dubai for a brief layover, then on to Japan to witness the cherry blossoms, another long-held dream. After that would come Australia, Argentina, and Brazil before returning to North America for her final destinations. Martha fell asleep to the distant roar of a lion somewhere in the darkness, a sound that would have terrified her 6 months ago but now felt like a perfect lullaby. Suma Mason, excuse me, Martha said carefully in her practiced Japanese, bowing slightly to the elderly gardener who had been watching her photograph the magnificent cherry trees of Kyoto's Maruyama Park. May I take your picture? The man, whose weathered face suggested he was even older than Martha, smiled and nodded. He stood proudly beside his rake, the cascading pink blossoms creating a perfect frame around him. Martha captured several images before showing him the results on her camera's display screen. Kirai desu, he said appreciatively. Beautiful. Arigato gozaimasu, Martha thanked him. 6 months into her journey, Martha had developed a ritual of connecting with at least one local resident wherever she traveled. In Australia, it had been an Aboriginal guide who taught her about the Dreamtime while showing her the sacred sites of Uluru. In Argentina, a tango instructor who persuaded her that 70 wasn't too old to learn the passionate dance. In Brazil, a grandmother near her own age who'd invited Martha into her home in Rio de Janeiro and taught her to make the perfect caipirinha. These connections gave her travels deeper meaning than mere sightseeing. They were exchanges between human beings transcending language, culture, and background, something Harold would never have made time for with his rigid itineraries and tourist trap priorities. Japan during cherry blossom season was everything Martha had dreamed it would be. For 10 days, she had immersed herself in the country's perfect balance of ancient tradition and ultramodern innovation. She'd stayed in a traditional ryokan with tatami mat floors and sliding paper doors in Kyoto, experienced the sensory overload of Tokyo's Shibuya crossing, meditated with Buddhist monks at a mountain temple, and eaten meals so beautifully presented they looked like works of art. Now on her last day in Japan before flying to Vancouver, Martha had returned to this park for one final hanami, cherry blossom viewing. Beneath trees that had witnessed centuries of human joy and sorrow yet still faithfully produced their ephemeral beauty each spring. Mono no aware, her guide had explained earlier in the week. It means an awareness of the impermanence of things. The cherry blossoms are so beautiful partly because they last such a short time. Their transience makes them precious. Martha understood this concept better than she would have 6 months ago. At 70, with more life behind her than ahead, the preciousness of transient moments was a truth that resonated deeply. She'd felt that same poignant appreciation at sunrise over Uluru, while watching southern right whales breach off the Australian coast, standing beneath the thundering power of Iguazu Falls in Argentina, and walking among giant tortoises in Brazil's Pantanal wetlands. The world was filled with fleeting wonders, and she was finally witnessing them. That evening, in her ryokan room, Martha carefully placed a pressed cherry blossom, a gift from the elderly gardener, into her journal next to her day's reflections. Then she selected her next postcard, attaching a photograph of herself in a rented kimono, standing beneath a canopy of pink blossoms, looking more elegant and at peace than she ever had in Cincinnati. Harold. Today I wore a kimono and participated in a traditional tea ceremony in Kyoto during peak cherry blossom season. The Japanese have a concept called mano no aware, an awareness that life's most beautiful moments are often the most fleeting, which makes them more precious. You said Japan was too foreign and too expensive. The ryokan where I'm staying costs less per night than our monthly cable bill, the one with all the sports channels you couldn't live without. The Japanese people are the most gracious hosts I've ever encountered. I've learned that nothing is too foreign when you approach it with an open heart. Martha. After sealing the envelope, Martha opened her laptop to check her email, another new skill she'd mastered during her travels. There was a message from Claire at World Discovery with the finalized details for her Vancouver arrangements, where she would spend 2 weeks exploring the spectacular landscapes of British Columbia. After that would come her final destination, New York City, a place Harold had always dismissed as too crowded, too expensive, and too dangerous, despite its proximity to Ohio. There was also an email from Patricia, her friend from the printing shop back home, forwarding a message that had arrived at Martha's old email address, the one Harold knew. Martha. I don't know if you're even checking this account anymore. Dave said he ran into Sheila from your book club, who mentioned you've been sending postcards from all over the world. I haven't received any, so I guess they're going to Kimberly's place. Things didn't work out with Kimberly. Turns out she was more interested in my retirement accounts than in me. I moved back into Dave's guest room in February. The house sold, as you probably know. I drive by sometimes remembering. The new owners painted it blue. You always wanted to paint it blue. I've been thinking a lot about us. About all the things I said we couldn't do. All the places we couldn't go. I was afraid, Martha. Afraid of change, afraid of the unknown. Afraid of not being the practical, responsible Harold Jensen everyone expected me to be. I miss you. I wonder if you miss me too, or if you're too busy living the life I was too scared to let us have. Harold. Martha read the email twice, feeling an unexpected twist of emotions, not the vindictive satisfaction she might have anticipated months ago, but something more complex. A blend of sadness for wasted years, pride in her own transformation, and a strange compassion for the man whose fear had limited them both for so long. She closed her laptop without replying. Perhaps someday she would, but not tonight. Tonight belonged to Japan, to cherry blossoms, to the woman she had become. Tomorrow, she would board a plane to Canada, to mountains and forests and the wild Pacific coastline. 3 more months of discovery still awaited her. Harold's regrets would have to wait. The yellow taxi pulled away from JFK Airport, carrying Martha through the sprawling boroughs of New York City toward Manhattan. Outside the window, autumn had painted the trees in Central Park with brushstrokes of scarlet and gold, a perfect finale to her journey that had begun in Parisian spring, continued through Mediterranean summer, and now concluded in East Coast fall. Almost 11 months had passed since she left Cincinnati and the shattered remains of her 30-year marriage. 11 months of discovery, growth, and transformation. The woman who now sat confidently in the back of a New York taxi, dressed in elegant clothes purchased in Tokyo, her silver hair styled in a chic bob courtesy of a salon in Vancouver. Her eyes bright with experience behind designer glasses found in a boutique in Buenos Aires bore little resemblance to the betrayed wife who had fled Ohio in heartbreak and anger. Martha's world discovery tour was drawing to its close. She had just 2 weeks left. 14 precious days to experience the city Harold had always refused to visit despite its relatively close proximity to their home. First time in New York? The taxi driver asked, catching her intent gaze at the approaching skyline. Yes, Martha replied. I've been almost everywhere else in the world this past year, but never here. Save the best for last, the driver said with typical New York pride. Her hotel was a boutique property in Soho, stylish and well-located, with none of the corporate blandness Harold had always preferred in accommodations. After checking in and freshening up, Martha consulted the itinerary Claire had helped her develop for her final destination. First on the list, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Though it was already late afternoon, Martha's world travels had taught her to make use of every available hour rather than waiting for the perfect time that might never come. The grand entrance hall of the Met took Martha's breath away, not just for its architectural splendor, but for what it represented: centuries of human creativity, expression, and vision. She had visited the Louvre in Paris, the Vatican museums in Rome, the Prado in Madrid, and countless other temples to human artistry around the world. Each had moved her, but standing here in her own country, she felt a special connection. As she wandered through the American wing, Martha found herself before John Singer Sargent's portrait, Madame X, the scandalously posed society woman in her black dress with one strap provocatively fallen. Martha stood transfixed, seeing something in the painting she'd never noticed in reproductions: a fierce independence in the subject's posture despite the constraints of her society. She caused quite a stir in her day, said a voice beside her. Martha turned to find an elegant woman approximately her own age, with short silver hair and intelligent eyes behind artistic, oversized glasses. "I can imagine," Martha replied. "She's not exactly demure." "Neither are you," the woman observed with a smile. "Solo female traveler?" Martha laughed. "Is it that obvious? It takes one to know one. I'm Eleanor, retired art history professor, widow, and perpetual wanderer. Martha, divorced, 70, and just finishing a year of traveling the world." They continued through the galleries together, discovering shared interests and complementary perspectives. Eleanor's professional knowledge of art enhanced Martha's appreciation of the collections, while Martha's recent global experiences provided fresh context for Eleanor's academic understanding. When the museum announced its imminent closing, Eleanor suggested dinner at a nearby restaurant. "Nothing touristy, I promise. A place where actual New Yorkers eat." Over exquisite pasta and a perfect Barolo, the two women shared stories of their respective journeys. Eleanor had been widowed young when her wife died of cancer 15 years earlier. Her grief had eventually transformed into a determination to live fully enough for both of them. "The first solo trip is the hardest," Eleanor said. "After that, you realize being alone doesn't mean being lonely." "I'm starting to understand that," Martha agreed. "Though I'll admit, there have been moments when I wished I had someone to share certain experiences with." "Like what?" Martha thought about it. "The sunset in Santorini. The leopard in Kenya. Cherry blossoms in Kyoto." Eleanor nodded. "The trick is finding people to share those moments without compromising where and how you want to experience them." As they parted ways that evening, with plans to meet again the following day for a guided walk through Eleanor's favorite hidden corners of the city, Martha realized she had found something unexpected: a kindred spirit whose path paralleled her own, despite having begun from very different points. The next 10 days unfolded in a blur of New York discoveries, many with Eleanor as her impromptu guide. They attended a Broadway show and a performance at Lincoln Center. They took the ferry to Ellis Island, where Martha discovered records of her own grandparents' arrival from Germany. They walked the High Line, explored the diverse neighborhoods from Harlem to Chinatown, and found a small jazz club in Greenwich Village where the musicians, upon learning it was Martha's first visit to New York, dedicated a song to the lady from Cincinnati who finally made it to the big city. Throughout it all, Martha continued her postcard ritual, sending Harold images of the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building at night, and herself eating a proper New York bagel with lox at Katz's Delicatessen. "Harold, New York is the final stop on my year-long journey. You always said it was too expensive, too crowded, too dangerous. It is crowded with some of the most interesting people I've ever met. As for expensive, I'm staying in Soho for less than what we paid for that forgettable resort in Branson, Missouri that you insisted was just as good as any big city. I've met a friend here, another woman my age who travels solo. She's been showing me places tourists never find. Last night she took me to a jazz club where they played my requests and treated me like visiting royalty. I haven't felt unsafe once." Martha. On her penultimate day in New York, Martha sat with Eleanor in Central Park, watching children sail toy boats on the conservatory water. It was a perfect autumn afternoon, crisp enough for light jackets but sunny enough to sit comfortably outdoors. "So," Eleanor said, "tomorrow's your last day. Then what?" Martha sighed. "That's the question, isn't it? My world discovery pass ends. I go back to somewhere. Not Cincinnati? No, Martha said firmly. There's nothing for me there anymore. The house is sold. My few close friends have promised to visit wherever I land. My sister lives in Florida now. You could stay in New York, Eleanor suggested, a touch of hopefulness in her voice. I know a building in my neighborhood with a vacancy. Garden apartment, reasonable rent, for New York, anyway. Tempting, Martha admitted. Very tempting. That evening in her hotel room, Martha found herself sorting through the physical mementos of her journey, ticket stubs, museum guides, pressed flowers, and small tokens gifted by people she'd met along the way. Each item triggered memories of places, experiences, and most importantly, revelations about herself. She opened her journal, no longer pristine but filled with nearly a year's worth of reflections. On the first page, her initial entry from that Parisian cafe seemed to have been written by a different woman, tentative yet defiant, hurt yet hopeful. Martha turned to a fresh page near the end of the journal and began to write. New York City, Day 13. Tomorrow, my year of wandering officially ends. When I began this journey, I was running away from betrayal, from the collapse of the life I thought I'd have forever. I was angry with Harold, but even more angry with myself for all the dreams I'd deferred, all the experiences I'd allowed to be dismissed as impractical or unnecessary. Now I understand that this journey wasn't about Harold at all. It was about me, about finding the Martha Jensen who got lost somewhere in 30 years of compromise. About discovering that I'm braver, more resourceful, and more alive than I ever imagined possible. Every place I visited has given me a piece of myself back. Paris taught me to savor. Santorini showed me the value of beauty. Kenya awakened my sense of wonder. Japan revealed the preciousness of impermanence. And New York has shown me possibilities. Eleanor asked what happens next. For the first time in my life, I don't need to know all the details of the plan. I only need to know that whatever I choose, it will be my choice, not a compromise, not a concession, not a sacrifice for someone else's comfort. Perhaps that's the greatest souvenir I'm bringing home, the knowledge that at 70 my story isn't ending. It's finally, truly beginning. On her final day in New York, Martha took a ferry to Liberty Island. Standing before the Statue of Liberty, she thought about what the monument had represented to millions of immigrants, including her own grandparents, the promise of a new beginning, of reinvention, of liberty in its truest sense. She took one last photograph, not of the statue itself, but a selfie with the statue visible behind her, her face radiant with the confidence of a woman who had found her freedom. Later, in a small cafe in Brooklyn where she and Eleanor had arranged to meet for a farewell dinner, Martha wrote her final postcard. She attached the Liberty photograph and addressed it to Harold at his brother Dave's address. Harold. Today I stood before the Statue of Liberty on my last day of a journey that has taken me to 6 continents, 14 countries, and places within myself I never knew existed. A year ago, when I discovered your affair, you told me you felt trapped in our marriage. I was devastated then. Now, I'm grateful. Your betrayal pushed me out of a life that had become too small for both of us. I've sent you these postcards not out of spite, but as evidence. All those places you said we couldn't afford, couldn't manage, couldn't risk. They were waiting for us. All those experiences you dismissed as impractical? They've been the most valuable of my life. This is my last postcard. I've run out of places you said we couldn't go. From now on, I'll be too busy discovering places neither of us ever imagined. I hope someday you find your own freedom, Harold. It's never too late to begin again. Martha. As she placed the postcard in her bag to mail later, Martha saw Eleanor enter the cafe, waving excitedly and holding what appeared to be a set of keys. The apartment is yours if you want it, Eleanor announced without preamble. The landlord owns this cafe and is a friend of mine. I told him about you and he's willing to offer a year's lease, renewable after that. Martha laughed. You're determined to keep me in New York, aren't you? I'm determined to keep you wherever you'll be happiest, Eleanor corrected. I just happen to think that might be New York. With occasional travel companions. She smiled meaningfully. Martha fingered the keys Eleanor had placed on the table. A garden apartment, you said? With space for all those plants you mentioned wanting to grow. An excellent natural light for photography. You could set up a small studio for all those amazing images you've captured. Martha thought about it, about New York's energy and diversity, about the friendship she'd found with Eleanor, about the possibilities of building a new life in a place where reinvention was practically the city motto. I'd need to go back to Cincinnati briefly, she said thoughtfully. To collect the few things I left in storage. To say proper goodbyes. Of course. And I'd want to travel again. Not another year-long journey, but regular explorations. There are still so many places I haven't seen. Naturally. In fact, I've been thinking about Japan in spring again. Cherry blossom season. I haven't been in years. Martha smiled. I know just where to stay in Kyoto. A lovely ryokan with the most peaceful garden. As they clinked glasses in a toast to new beginnings, Martha felt a profound sense of homecoming, not to a physical place, but to herself. The journey that had begun in betrayal and heartbreak had transformed into something far more meaningful. The discovery that freedom wasn't about geography but about authenticity. At 70, Martha Jensen had finally found her true north, and it had nothing to do with maps or postcards or faraway destinations. It was the simple, profound liberty to be exactly who she was, wherever she happened to be. The world would always have more places to explore. But for the first time in her life, Martha was no longer searching for somewhere else to find herself. She was already home.